if anybody wants to look at it. But it just speaks to the level of communication we've had so far. So the first one, policy question 1, this is where we're talking about keeping those city-owned sites in the program. So those city-owned sites, as we all know, have been in the program since early 2023. To date, there have been 11 total public meetings spread between ad hoc committee meetings and full city council. All those meetings can be found on our city's long-range planning website. HCD requires that there are achievable, measurable actions in a housing element. And these city sites are part of the puzzle to meet that affordability mix of 349 units. We've talked about this before in the past, but 2 of the guiding principles that we started out with in this process were 1, don't go above 2 stories in the downtown area. 2, do not intensify the residential district. In other words, don't put multifamily housing in the R1 district. So almost 2 years ago, we set off with those 2 goals in mind. And in order to meet our mix of affordability, we needed some sites that could handle affordable housing. And the sites, the city-owned sites that are in the list right now are the way that we got there to be able to do that. I do want to make one little quick note, and this is, of the many comments we've received in the last couple of weeks. There was some concern expressed about the list that's in the housing element. There's a list that numbers all of the sites, all of the opportunity sites in the housing element. Those numbers correlate to a map. They have no relevance to the order in which a project will be undertaken or the priority. The Sunset Center, North and South, and Vista Lobos happen to be numbers 1, 2, and 3, but those numbers do not mean that those are the projects that are going to happen first or are be given the most priority. Those numbers correlate to a map. Think of them like a tag on a tree. That's all they mean. And this is a good example of a comment we received during the public comment period, that when we send it back to the state, we can make that change and not have to go back through a whole 7-day public comment period, because that comment came out of this public comment period. So we fully intend on putting a note at the top of that sheet that says these numbers have no bearing on priority or relevance to the time in which a project will be undertaken. They're simply for identification. So going on with this policy question 1 about the city-owned sites and whether or not the city council wishes to keep them in the housing element, I think it's important to note also that also it's important to note how the Surplus Land Act applies to it. It does not require selling property. Any property that's owned by a jurisdiction is subject to compliance with this law. Any actions, including an RFP, would always have broad public input. The public would be very involved in that process. And parking, take the Sunset Center lot, for example. Parking cannot be reduced there. That's just something that can't happen because of the approvals for that site already and the environmental work that was done. The last little note on here about the city sites is that the dates in the housing element for an RFP are target dates only. Yes, we've put them in there as what we are working towards, but I've said this multiple times, a housing element is a living document. And so if those have to flex for various reasons, they can. We just have to communicate with our partners at the state. So that's really it about policy question number 1. So the question, as I mentioned, I'm just going to keep going back to this, is does the city council want to keep the city-owned sites? We've gotten public comments requesting that they be removed. I do have to say, and this is not an opinion, I think this is just a statement of fact, removing those city-owned sites today or on Monday, the 8th, would delay an April 15th certification. There's just no way around that, because we would have to identify new sites to backfill those, and there would need to be potential zoning changes, or at least identify and analyze those new sites for viability. So that's question 1. Do we want to keep the city-owned sites in the housing element? Policy question 2. This comes out of that March meeting that we had, March 5th, I believe. This was the language that was presented to the city council on March 5th about those city-owned sites. At the time, they were actually called underutilized sites. You see, I've highlighted certain sections of this in yellow. There is more to this program language. It's all on the website. All the changes are lined out there in strike through and underline, but I thought these were the most pertinent parts that we talked about. So this is the language you saw on March 5th. We called them underutilized sites. And the language that was in there at the time said that we would make 3 sites available through the Surplus Lands Act. And that was where the conversation started, was making them available through the Surplus Lands Act. You can see there's other language here that talks about making them available for affordable housing consistent with the requirements of the Surplus Land Act. So the language was modified coming out of this, and there has been some public comments that perhaps staff got the language wrong. And that's why we're here. That's why I'm asking these questions, because we really do feel like we did our noble best. We reviewed the video, we worked with our housing ad hoc committee, and we feel like we met what the city council was talking about and reviewing the video, that we were trying not to make them available through the Surplus Lands Act. We wanted to soften that language about the Surplus Lands Act. So what we came up with, when I say we, it's the city staff reviewing the videos, working with our city's ad hoc committee on housing. We changed underutilized sites to city-owned sites so that we weren't implying that we weren't using those sites. And then we changed the language to say that we are going to make these 3 sites available over the next 5 years, which is true. Because these sites are in the program, they will need to be made available at some point through the RFP process, which, if you remember I talked about earlier, is a broad, very public involved process. It doesn't say that we're going to make them available as surplus land, though. That was, not the intention of the original language, so we clarified that. We also clarified the language about the laws to make it clear that we're going to take these projects on and process them in accordance with the requirements of the Surplus Land Act and all other applicable state laws. So it's clear we're not just focused on the Surplus Lands Act. If you remember from that meeting, the state came to us at the previous iteration and said, you have to at least acknowledge the Surplus Lands Act. That's why this language came into the document, because our state reviewer said, if you want your housing element certified, you have to acknowledge the Surplus Lands Act. That's really where this language came from. So after the March 8th language was sent to the state, they have reviewed that. They are comfortable with this language, the state. However, I do want to say that after this was sent to the state on the 8th, we did receive an email from Councilmember Dramov as a comment, and thank you for that, with some additional suggestions on how we might further modify that language coming out of the March 5th meeting. You can see here I've struck through and highlighted basically changing the word make 3 sites available over the next 3 years to pursue 3 sites over the next 5 years. And then the second change would be these sites would remain in city ownership rather than our plan to remain in city ownership. And the goal of this language, and speaking with Councilmember Dramov, and I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I understand it is to further round the corners out of this language so that it makes it clear what the city's intention was with respect to the Surplus Lands Act and retaining city ownership, making it clear that we're not getting rid of our land. So if we want to add these changes in, I just need the council to tell me that tonight. I don't know for sure if this exact language would be okayed by HCD. I would have to run that by them, but it seems like it's not really changing any large policy things. It's just making our intent more clear through the language change. So that's really it. I mean, I gave you the update on the calendar. If I'm being, I need to be a little bit more candid, I suppose. There have been emails and accusations that staff intentionally ignored council's directions on 2 points, and I assure you that nothing could be further from the truth on that. We really do our best, and I know that the community on large knows that, and we've taken this process really seriously. We feel like we did our noble best and went through the videos, worked with our ad hoc committee, and made edits. But that's why we're here tonight. 1, to give you the update, and 2, really to bring closure to these 2 contentions that have been going around. So we're looking for council to provide confirmation and clear up those community concerns. If we got something wrong, I'll be the first one to own that. I've been wrong before. There's many people in my life that will tell you that, and I'm okay with that. But it certainly was not intentional, so we want to get some answers on question 1. Does the city council want to keep those city-owned sites in the housing element as potential sites? I would appreciate greatly hearing from each city council member. And then the second question, if we do keep those city-owned sites in the housing element, is the city council okay with the language that was worked on by the staff and the housing ad hoc committee and sent to the state from that March 5th council meeting? And with that, I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Question by council members.
Could I interrupt for just a moment? I need a word with Brandon Swanson. So can we take like a 1 minute
Sure.
recess? Okay.
So remember, I'm okay making mistakes?
Yeah.
I'm okay making mistakes. So Brian very kindly made me aware that I may have overstated what I'm looking for tonight on these questions. So you, because of the way this was noticed and because it was set for continuance, you can't decide tonight whether or not to put in or remove those sites on the housing element, because that's the way the housing element is written right now. We'll come back on March 8th for adoption of the housing element. April 8th. Thank you, Chip. See, making mistakes all over the place. Thanks, and I'm okay with that. And so we're not. I can't ask you, or you can't give us specific direction on pulling things in and out or changing language tonight in programs. I do believe, though, and Counselor can correct me if I'm wrong. You are open. You are free to discuss what you've said in the past, if you choose, so that we know what to do when we come back for adoption on April 8th. That may help a little bit, but we're not looking for direction on to pull something in or take something, put something in or take something out tonight specifically. How'd I do, Brian?
Well, B plus. I would just, to give you an A, I would just add that, so there's no mistake about it, that the decision on whether or not to keep the city-owned sites in the housing element or not will not be made until Monday, April 8th. And the decision on what language to put in about the Surplus Land Act will be made on April 8th. Tonight, you've heard the comments from Mr. Swanson. We'll be hearing from the public on that as well. You should consider all that, and then when it comes back on April 8th is when you'll be making the decision on those two.
I'm happy being a B plus lawyer, that's fine.
So
Yeah.
can I ask a question? So we can comment on the two questions, but Brandon can't count to 5 or what?
Well, you can comment on it. All I'm saying is that you keep an open mind on the issues that are presented to you, because the decision on those issues is going to be made on Monday. So you shouldn't say, for example, tonight, well, I've already made up my mind and I want the city sites to be in or out. You can certainly discuss it, as can the public, as to whether they should be in or out, but the decision on whether they'll be in or out will be on Monday, the 8th of April.
Okay, with that, I would just like to make a comment about what you were saying, Brandon. And I want to assure you, in no way did you or staff ever misrepresent anything that I've thought or said or approved. everything has been according to Hoyle, in my opinion. So I appreciate the work that you've done. I appreciate the work that your staff has done and our staff. And it's amazing that we got to where we are without any real zoning changes. So thank you very much.
Okay, with that noted, I'm going to open up the public comment unless there's comments by council members. I don't see any. Beth Bauman would be first. Beth? Oh, hold on a second.
Wait, no,
Good.
Beth Bauman's on Zoom. You want to
Yeah,
do
she's
Zoom
on Zoom, I
first?
think.
Okay, hold on a second. Zoom first?
We're going to Zoom.
Okay. Beth Bowman, go ahead.
Okay. I'm here on behalf of the Sunset Cultural Center and the Board of Trustees to express our appreciation to city staff members Chip Rarig and Brandon Swanson and council members Karen Ferlito and Bobby Richards for the time and consideration they gave addressing our questions and concerns regarding the state's housing requirements of Carmel-by-the-Sea. We will continue to work closely with our city partner on solutions that support our existence as a cultural hub and contribute to positive outcomes for all involved. Thank you very much for all your hard work.
Thank you, Beth. Appreciate that. All right, Nancy, 2 minutes, looks like.
Nancy Toomey, speaking on behalf of my role as a resident in Carmel-by-the-Sea. Thank you very much for everything you do on our behalf, especially this big, difficult project. I wanted to offer a statement for the record that I personally support submission of this current and yet imperfect draft of the housing element to Sacramento for final Carmel-by-the-Sea certification, or whatever the right word is for this part in the process. This current version does yeoman's work to address how we can move ahead on our 349 housing units of the RENA allocation in our 1 square mile village. However, as village citizens, we must stay actively engaged in the next steps and the deliverables and programs called out in this housing element so that we preserve the village and the forest by the sea. Trees cannot be sacrificed for incremental housing, and as we move forward, we preserve also our architectural character and charm with all the new construction with local controls. This is not only critical to our residents, predominantly living in homes with a 4,000 square foot lot, but also to our downtown businesses. We benefit from the international and domestic recognition that emphasizes the amazing look and feel to our village in both residential and commercial districts. As concerned and committed village stewards, we all cannot destroy this precious, excuse my enunciation there, heritage for everyone's benefit and for the generations to come. We also we must minimize back-to-back construction zones with locally approved building throughout our village for the next 7 years of this current cycle and beyond. Finally, the real scarcity of water and open land remain critical impediments to meeting the state mandate as well. While our water availability must be addressed at a state level, our lack of available unused land cannot be addressed without annexing surrounding land or eliminating our open parkland, which we know are not on the plate for any of this particular planning. Our village and its future simply cannot risk non-compliance with the penalties of noncompliance, including builder's remedy, end of state grants, fines, and removal of local land use and zoning controls. So I believe together we can make incremental progress on our stated housing element, but continued community involvement with careful oversight will be essential in the months to come. And count me in to be a part of that effort. Thank you for your consideration and efforts on our behalf.
Thank you, Nancy. Appreciate
Thanks.
it. Next speaker.
Thanks, Brandon.
I'm Victoria Beach. I want to thank the council for last month's near unanimous decision to direction to staff to fix the public lands problem of our housing element. I want to especially thank Vice Mayor Richards for his clarity that public land should only be mentioned as a backup and with if-then clauses. And then I, of course, want to especially thank the mayor, Mayor Potter, for his clarity that we should never imply that public land will be surplus or even mention the Surplus Land Act, although we have new information on that today, since, as you said, Mayor, Carmel will, of course, follow all applicable state laws. It's good to see you back, Dave. So given the state's emphasis on community participation and buy-in, it's a little disheartening to see that the language is still not fully corrected. It was partially corrected on one page, but I passed out now there are 6 other locations where it's not fully carried through as the council directed. But I am re-heartened to see that today we are rolling up our sleeves again to tackle this. I am a true YIMBY with professional history of running public housing programs. I know housing is tough, and therefore it must be set up for the greatest possible success. We should never have introduced the unnecessary complexity and controversy of public lands. Luckily, we have better solutions right under our nose. Here is just one of them. I'll run through a little Carmel math for you. It sounds like we're already letting go of the idea of 410, if we must, of units that are extra. Let's also, as a thought experiment, strike out the 149 of public lands. Last year, the state required 340 RENA units for us. We've already have 49 accounted for. That leaves us 300. Of the 300, 261 are already worked out by the staff brilliantly to be on non-public lands. That leaves us 39 units to find. The state in November reminded us that we are required to include religious institutions. This is just one idea. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm not an expert on the local thing, but this is something the state requires. We have about 15 acres of land that are within Carmel-by-the-Sea on church land. We have 8 acres, more or less, of land doesn't have structures on it. That's not to mention buildings that could be repurposed. At the lowest possible per dwelling unit per acre amount, that yields 262 units. We allow up to 88 right now per acre. That gives us almost 700. Let's forget those big numbers. Take a half of the smallest number. Take a third, take a quarter. We're well over 39 units. So despite losing 6 months to not really reviewing this and discussing publicly, we still have time to fix this. If it is not fixed, it will not go away, even after the element is submitted. Folks from different perspectives, strangers to one another, are up in arms about public lands being promised away in writing with no public process. Members of this council and staff have made assurances that the writing part doesn't matter because we need not build these units. We understand that concept. But most of us actually want these units to be built, and we want them to succeed. They cannot easily succeed on controversial lands. Please read the room. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name is Sam Farr. I'm a lifelong resident of Carmel, and part of that residency was going through Sunset School from kindergarten through 8th grade. But I also, after I got out of school, I ended up with spending 42 years in elective office as a county supervisor, a state assembly member, and a congressman. And I'm here tonight just to reflect my feelings about the position you're in. First of all, as a chair of the local government committee in the legislature, very aware of the land use plans in California. We require that every city and county has to, and other local entities has to have a master plan, and they have to have 6 or 7 chapters called elements. The housing is just one of them. You've all accepted all the others without much controversy. The housing element indeed is local generated. It's generated from the facts that are collected at your city. They're generated by the census data that's collected in your city. And that is all your responsibility to sort of sustain the ability for Carmel to have what it is, the heritage of this town. And I feel it's not only a legal obligation to adopt your general plan, but I think it's a moral obligation. I think the only way you're going to be able to save Carmel is to really honor what that sign says, is to build a city for residents. And that means residents of all income. When I grew up here, every store was owned by a resident. They had children. Everybody who worked in those stores was a resident. Everybody who worked in all the hotels here at entry-level levels were all residents. They owned houses or rented houses here. I think the way you bring back Carmel is you really invest eagerly in this general plan. And as far as what you're going to call it, I don't even know about all these names at Sunset, but I think what you really want to do is emphasize what Carmel is aesthetics. It's all about aesthetics. It's what it looks like. And I think if you challenge people, give us something that'll really be beautiful. The north side of Sunset School could hold something. Lots of apartments. It could be done beautifully. Build in there. I think you can do it in other places. Emphasize and challenge to get the best minds and the best designs to be able to fit the patterns. You set the criteria, and then challenge people to make that criteria. Because I think Carmel can build a city that really has residents of all incomes, as it historically did. I mean, the way it's going now, the people who wrote that preamble, who built this building, wouldn't be able to live in Carmel. Your employees can't live in Carmel. That's embarrassing. School teachers can't live in Carmel. That's embarrassing. Carmel ought not to be afraid as this world center to tackle these problems and show the world that how you can do it. It's just skills. It's imagination. It's vision. And that's what this city was built on and sustained on. So let's adopt that element and let's get this city back where residents are in control of all income and all multicultural backgrounds. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Next speaker.
Good evening, Rich Peppery. Hello, Mayor Potter, council members and staff, and what an honor to speak after Sam Farr. It's wonderful. That's why I got up right after Sam. You already know I am not in favor of leaving Sunset Center and Vista Lobos in the housing plan. Please also know that I am in total favor of low-cost housing, but scattered throughout the village and not packed and stacked on top of a parking garage. When I first arrived in Carmel 50 years ago, I was working at Wishart's Bakery on Ocean Avenue, and Graham Robinson's father helped me rent a small studio the size of a Volkswagen van up on Santa Fe Street. I was able to walk to work and got my start in life. Today, I have over 100 employees that would appreciate and also an opportunity to live in town and work nearby. If Sunset Center and Vista Lobos are left in the plan and an RFP goes out, I guarantee a builder will take you up on your offer. We will have a low-cost housing development flanking the historic Sunset Center with expensive underground parking, which will deny access to many who currently park there for free. If you truly believe the majority of residents want that, which I highly doubt, then I am in the minority, and I will live with your decision. Upon my review and calculations in the site list, as Brandon mentioned, it appears the consultant did not account for enough opportunity sites on second stories of downtown buildings. I currently own 3 buildings, the Carmel Bakery property, Vesuvio building, and the El Paseo building, each with second-story dwelling capabilities. The consultant nor anyone from City Hall ever contacted me to inquire about my opportunity sites, which could add up to as many as 12. And according to Victoria Beach, we only need another 39. How many other downtown building owners were not contacted as well, or buildings considered for second-story capabilities? I would have expected it was the consultant's job to find as many opportunities as possible. Maybe there's a reasonable explanation, and if so, please enlighten me. I believe the city council can remove the Sunset and Vista Lobos as opportunity sites and still get to the numbers that are necessary. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rich. Next speaker.
My name's Hans Buder, and I live here in town, and I wanted to comment on the housing element. I also want to give just a little bit of background on my background, because I think it's germane. I'm the chair of the board of the Monterey County Housing Authority, though I'm speaking tonight as a private citizen. We house about 20,000 people countywide. We're the largest low-income housing provider in the county. And among other things, we develop affordable housing principally by leveraging the right of first refusal afforded to us through the Surplus Lands Act. I'm also a former affordable housing developer, and in my day job, I actually run an impact investing fund and an affiliated nonprofit focused on helping low-income families with children gain access to housing in high-opportunity communities with high-performing public schools. Turning to the housing element, I did want to give a shout out to Bobby and Karen and to the staff for shepherding this process to the point where we have an actionable plan that the state is willing to accept by the deadline that will spare us from the nightmare scenarios with the builder's remedy. You know, you guys really were dealt a difficult hand. I know HCD hasn't been easy to work with, and as Jeff pointed out in the last meeting, as Brandon pointed out tonight, you know, you're operating under constraints. You know, folks don't want to do anything in R1. They don't want third stories downtown. That being said, I do see a major flaw, which is that the current plan has the effect of concentrating poverty by squeezing the vast majority of the deeply affordable, very low and low income units onto just 2 of the 25 sites identified in the plan. So as you can see here, of the 177 potential income restricted units identified across the 25 sites, 149 are on the Sunset Center and Vista Lobos sites. Equally concerning, these 2 sites have 149 income restricted units and 0 market rate units. In other words, they're 100% income restricted. Interestingly, the other 22 sites have been allocated all of the 51 market rate units. The concern I have is this goes against about 5 decades of social science research, which tells us that concentrating poverty is a bad idea. It leads to negative outcomes for low-income residents as well as the broader community. It sets up an us versus them dynamic that prevents low-income families from fully assimilating into and being accepted by the community, and it ultimately outs the low-income families, thereby robbing them of their dignity. As someone who spent the past decade working in the affordable housing space, it pains me to think that we would build something here in Carmel that doesn't conform to best practice and that doesn't align with the research findings on the subject. So I was really heartened to hear what Brandon said in the last meeting and tonight about how this is a living document, how it can be modified as needed once adopted. And I hope that we can work creatively to ensure that we do ultimately develop these sites as developments that are mixed income. And if there's an implementation group that ultimately takes the baton here, you know, I'd love to volunteer to be a part of it.
Thank you, appreciate it. Next speaker.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Ian Martin. I'm a resident and a former planning commissioner. My big thing is the edits, and one of the edits, and Brandon has been very receptive to listening to what I've had to say, and I appreciate that, and I feel heard, and I think that's very important. This is obviously one heck of a lot of work that everybody's put into this, and so far as I can tell, it's been utterly thankless, as such as public service. So anyway, thank you for taking this on, because as I guess he went home, Sam pointed out, yeah, I mean, Carmel-by-the-Sea, really, this is an important part of our legacy of having, you know, people who can afford to live here, who are teachers, which is the town was originally marketed for. So good on you all for tackling this beast. A couple of important edits that really, I think, are essential to be made. One is the incentive, builder's incentive. It says that on the top of the page of 2.5, it says specific actions the city is committed to. It says it's committing to developing an incentive of one public hearing. So if you are a developer and you want to develop the parking lots of Sunset Center or Vista Lobos, then the city is saying we're going to develop an incentive that you would only have to do one public hearing. So that, I think, could be easily struck out, because obviously if we're going to develop a parking lot of Sunset Center or Vista Lobos, we're going to have a heck of a lot more than one public hearing to get it right. As Sam pointed out, aesthetics are important, doing something quality is important. We can't just do one public hearing. So I sent in my comments about that, showing exactly where that's found. That's very important. You got to eliminate that, right? Because it's also about maintaining confidence in the process. And so to say to the developer, hey, one public hearing, you're in and you're out, and you get your, that's just not going to work. The other edits that I feel strongly about is that I think it really needs to be made crystal clear that to take the parking lots of the Sunset Center or Vista Lobos is going to be an individual separate process that's going to require public deliberation, public input, and then a vote on council with no guaranteed outcome in advance, right? This is the if-then statement. So in the event council were to decide that we're going to make the parking lots of the Sunset Center and Vista Lobos surplus, then of course, as per state law, then yes, we're going to offer those up to affordable housing as we're required to do under the Surplus Lands Act. But it really needs to be made very clear in the housing element and to the public that there's going to be a complete, separate, discrete process by which we will or will not make those lands available. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Appreciate it. Anybody else wishing to speak in this house? Let's not be shy.
Hello, Mayor Potter and City Council. I'm Christy Ramers. I am supportive of doing what we can to remove the 3 public land sites and recalculating our numbers to achieve our 349 units within the commercial and residential areas, plus utilizing the church sites, which at the moment are underutilized in the current plan. The 3 public sites have become such a source of contention that moving forward with them promised for build-out is only going to create ongoing contention. I was especially dismayed to see that one of the incentives, as Ian just mentioned, for future builders of these properties was to have a maximum of 1 public meeting regarding a proposed project. This will undoubtedly cause upset among the residents. From what we have just learned, we don't need to use these lands in our calculations for the state. And if we can do this in a way that also is agreeable to many of the residents, then overall it is a win-win. We want the housing to be something that is wanted, not something that is a source of argument. We want this to be a warm welcome for our new residents to come. If it is a living, breathing document, then we could take them out, recalculate, and put them back in later if we're really off in our numbers, was just a thought I had. And if the sites stay in, I would like to see the comment put in that we have, if we have a developer, that it be a developer that's got an affordable housing background with a proven track record. Right now, it's just on Sunset Center North Lot in the plan, but it should be on all 3. And I do want to end to say thank you for the staff for working so hard on this. I know we're yards ahead of all the other towns in the county, so thank you.
Thank you, Christy. Appreciate it. Next speaker.
Mayor Potter and City Council members, this is Christy Hollenbeck. I appreciate all the hard work that went into the housing element, and I do agree with Christy Reamer. She said it very eloquently. I'm not in favor of giving up the 3 parking lots. I do think we need more parking in Carmel, not less. And I don't feel that a large apartment building would fit in with our town. I was walking on the beach and I talked to a man who lives in the Bay Area, and he said they built a huge apartment building in his area and it went up really quickly because it was prefabricated and they just had to assemble it. He said the community is very upset, and the look of the building and the complete lack of parking, because they didn't plan for any parking with it. He did not understand how that could have been allowed. Meanwhile, in Huntington Beach, officials have filed lawsuits in federal court alleging that housing mandates are illegal overreach by Sacramento that infringes on municipal zoning laws. Many other cities are extremely upset with the state's unreasonable and unrealistic one-size-fits-all demands. I feel that requiring tiny historic Carmel to build 350 low-income properties is unreasonable, and it is overreach by the state. I hope we will join with other cities. I just found a really good group in Marin. It's called citizenmarin.org. And I just heard that Amy Kalish, the head of the group, will be speaking Friday at 2 p.m. at the Barnyard. I hope that we can find a different solution. I know we have to get it in quickly, but it's from what Victoria said, it sounds like we could get these done pretty quickly, and I hope that we can do that. This is our village, and we need to keep local control. Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. Is there anybody else wishing to speak in the House?
Good evening, Vince Kohler, your local resident sociologist is back, although I realize I've been replaced by a better looking and younger version of myself who does the numbers better. As I mentioned last month, I'm also an avowed YIMBY. I do say yes to housing in my backyard. In fact, I'd rather have it in my backyard than at the Sunset Center. Not exactly for the same reasons as the previous speaker. So everything I say, as I said it last month, is in support of our community doing its fair share. Sam Farr spoke eloquently about the fact that we do need to get there. Last month I spoke about why I thought it was a bad idea to concentrate housing, affordable housing in a single or in a couple of sites when a more dispersed option exists. As the staff noted last time, the state doesn't favor such a solution. The staff, unless I misheard council direction, also didn't, the council didn't favor such a solution. What I didn't know last time, but has come to light since, is that the city does have another option that is far superior. As Victoria Beach stated, clearly the state has made it particularly easy for religious institutions to make use of their properties to help address housing shortages. Again, from a sociological point of view, there are several reasons for this. Religious institutions, by definition, are socially minded. They also often hold key real estate in a community, and they are part of the community and are interested in solving and being part of the housing solution for their own congregations, even for their own pastors who probably can't afford the rent or certainly not buying a home here, but also for the community as a whole. You saw the math that was presented about how many units could be accommodated in a dispersed way by multiple religious institutions. That's just one example. That's not the whole. You also heard from an owner of a commercial real estate of commercial real estate in the heart of town who wants to help house his own workforce. Those are all solutions that, from a sociological point of view, are so far superior to warehousing people in a single site or in a few sites that are far less likely to actually be built, because it actually won't pencil out to any developer. But if they never get built, then isn't it disingenuous for the city to tell the state that we're putting all of our eggs in that basket and that we accept the fact that it won't happen? So it's not hard to fix this, and it won't take months to fix it. The math is already before you. I urge you to adopt a plan that reflects this new information and your previous guidance all at once. Thank you.
Thank you, Vince, appreciate it. Is anybody else wishing to speak in the House? I don't see anybody. I'll go out then to Zoom world, and we have Michael Noakes. Michael Noakes, you have the floor. Michael?
Michael, go ahead. Michael Noakes on Zoom. You're unmuted. You can speak.
Michael, last chance. You can move to the back of the line. We'll go on to Andy Carr then. Andy?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I'm in Las Vegas sitting in a restaurant. I've been on Zoom, missing cocktail hour and dinner since 4:30. That's how important this issue is for me. I want to say that I'm very proud of the residents who have stepped up to become involved. I think a lot of us have sat back for a long time. We feel like we're in vacation living in Carmel-by-the-Sea, and we're coming out. And we're coming out because we are concerned. I cannot say that I appreciate the process that has gone on with affordable housing. In fact, I feel the entire process from the people representing us has been very disturbing. I say that because I'll speak for myself, but I'm speaking for other people as well. We have had our concerns, we speak, and our issues get put in a drawer, never to be addressed. I want to know from Karen Ferlito and Bobby Richards, how many local people were on their ad hoc committee? I'd like an answer now.
Sorry, Andy, you won't be getting that answer now. So if that completes your testimony, you're done. Did you want to say anything else?
Yes, I do, but I do want an answer to that. I'm tired of locals asking questions and we don't get answers. And then it continues to the point that it seems like we have two factions. And the truth of the matter is that we are not against affordable housing. We are against a committee spending, and this is what I was told, and if it's not correct, I'd like it to be corrected, $400,000 for a group called EMC to make the proposal that they did that many of us are not happy with. So I'd like to know why they felt that the council and whoever's in charge needed to spend that much money to get improper direction. And by improper direction, I feel what I have learned is that the properties that were identified, from what I read, do not fit the guidelines of the housing element. And I don't understand that. If we paid $400,000 for this report, shouldn't these people have known exactly what would be proper and good? And why wouldn't they even involve public? So that's a concern. My neighbor and friend Jim Ardaz, who cannot be online tonight, nor can he be in Carmel-by-the-Sea, and I wrote a letter to that effect, and we copied the city council, the mayor, Chip and Brandon, and sent a copy to the state regarding the properties that don't fit the guidelines.
Andy, thank you.
I also have one more thing to say. The people that live in Carmel-by-the-Sea are smart. We have businesses here that are trying to make a living. And I really would hope that before you start outsourcing consultants and architects and other such things that we need for our services, that we try to use the people within our community who, if they are not capable of getting all the answers, they are capable of going to people to find out what they need.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you. Appreciate it. Next speaker is Michael McWalters. Michael, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Potter. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I wanted to ask everyone to read Beth Bowman's letter to the editor in the Pine Cone on March the 8th. As we know, she's the executive director of the Sunset Cultural Center. Last year, Councilmember Richards described our response to the California Housing Department's affordable housing mandate as a homework assignment, quote unquote. His ad hoc committee identified over 360 sites where affordable housing units could be built. Those affordable housing sites did not include the Sunset Center's north and south parking lots or the Vista Lobos parking lot, so I obviously take issue with Brandon Swanson. The question is, Mayor Potter, you and Councilmember Barron did an ad hoc for a year, spent $300,000 with Mr. Muir. And in January of this year, you said your number one site for a new police station is Vista Lobos. So how is it that you got a site on Vista Lobos for a police station, and yet it's been in the plan, the program, the housing element since early last year? There's a major disconnect there. So when Brandon Swanson talked about being candid, I'd like him to be honest. The staff described the Sunset lots and the Vista Lobos lots as underutilized to the state of California. Excuse me? These lots are vital to the business district. They're vital to the Sunset Cultural Center. And if these sites are converted to housing, the business district will experience a major, they're going to do a lot less business than they otherwise would, and the Sunset Center will cease to exist. The bigger question for me is, after having identified over 349 sites, why were the parking lots at Sunset Center and Vista Lobos targeted for affordable housing when Carmel-by-the-Sea has a serious parking shortage? Councilmember Filito has been talking about our parking problem, quote unquote, for years. I'm in favor of protecting the Sunset Cultural Center. In order to do that, their parking lots north and south have to remain as parking lots. These parking lots would never be designated as quote unquote surplus if we were to follow the protocol laid out in the Surplus Lands Act. We should not be deceiving the state of California into thinking we would ever make these parking lots surplus. It's ridiculous and it's dishonest. These parking lots are vital, and as I already said, they're vital not only for the Sunset Cultural Center, but for our commercial district. Over 50% of City Hall's budget comes from the TOT, transit occupancy tax, and it's also called the hotel tax, and from sales tax. So if we take these lots for affordable housing, and by the way, I agree with Vince Kohler, these affordable units should be dispersed throughout the 1 square mile village. I agree with Victoria Beach. Her analysis is excellent. She should be writing this housing element. Rich Pepe, he said he's got 12 units on his 3 buildings that could be affordable housing. We haven't done the work yet. As my dad would say, this is really a half-assed job that has been done. And so the answer to the state of California is absolutely no on the Sunset Center lots and the Vista Lobos lots. Absolutely not. We push back, and we expect you guys on the city council to represent the people, the residents, and the citizens in Carmel to Sacramento. What I've been looking at here and thinking about is you guys are representing Sacramento to us. We didn't elect you to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McWalders. Michael Noakes, you're up next. Michael.
Michael Noakes, you can unmute yourself.
There you go. All right, Michael.
Hello. Hi.
Hi.
Am I there?
Yep, you're live.
Oh, hallelujah. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm a relative newcomer. My mom saved for years to buy a very small house within the city limits. That was in 2012. And I readily admit preferring things being left alone, and recently became concerned about the possible lease of the parking lots. So 2 weeks ago, I ran a postcard campaign in opposition to the idea and to assess the community's position. Of the 150 cards distributed, 100 were returned, so that's 67%. And so in turn, I wrote a petition requesting a delay or language notifying the state the lots are in use and unavailable, or to take them out as potential sites. 120 people have signed the petition in 10 hours of daylight, which is definitely atypical. So I'm hoping the results will encourage the council to agree or honor the request. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it. Is there anybody else wishing to testify tonight? In Zoom or in the real world?
There's Jean McWalters.
We did Mr. McWalters. We did him.
Well, that,
Okay, that's it. We're going to close the public comment, bring it back to council. Council members.
Oh,
Oh, I'm sorry.
okay, so is it Jean?
Yeah, Jean.
Jean, go ahead.
Am I unmuted now?
Yes, I'm sorry, Jean. Yes, you are. You're good to go.
Oh, okay, great. All right. Hi, my name is Jean McWalters. First, I would like to voice my disapproval to a few parts of Marnie Waffle's PowerPoint presentation of housing proposals on the May 24th, 23 special meeting workshop, where she suggests some radically new zoning that I feel would damage Carmel permanently and erase 100 years of thoughtful planning, as Alessandra Dermov has said in many meetings. Here are the 3 points that I had a lot of trouble with. Number 1, create an affordable housing overlay zone, AHOZ, in commercial districts with a minimum required density of 33 dwellings per acre. That was 1. Second, create a water distribution policy to prioritize water allocations to support affordable housing goals. And the last thing that bothered me was eliminate the use permit requirements for multifamily development in the AHOZ. Secondly, a comment of Mayor Potter in an October 9th, 2020 article written by Mary Schley about a forum, I think it was with Laird, I'm not sure, surprised me because it was more than 3.5 years ago, well before the housing workshops for the public. This is Mary Schley's quote: "On the question of state-mandated affordable housing, Potter and Masudi said a project could be built in the north lot of the Sunset Center," quote unquote. That just surprised me. That's just throwing it out there because I thought that was a new idea, but apparently it isn't new for Mayor Potter. Lastly, Bobby Richards and Karen Ferlito have lulled us into these housing mandates by reassuring us that it's just a homework assignment. I really find that hard to believe at this point. Thank you. Those are my points. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. McWalters. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak
Yeah,
tonight?
there's phone number ending in 653.
653, you have the floor.
Hi, this is Parker Logan.
Parker, go right ahead.
Thank you. And thanks for everyone's comments that I've heard a lot about clarification and clarity. Well, it seems like there's only one thing that can be clear, and that's that we need some new council members. So when November comes around, this should be a major election issue, so we can get people who do represent the residents of Carmel-by-the-Sea and not bringing Sacramento to us. So be wary, everyone. We need a big change to keep Carmel, Carmel. Thank you.
Thank you, Parker. Anybody else wishing to speak? Right, we do have somebody in the house here, yes?
Joe DiNucci. I've followed this as well. My sense is I don't have any sense of dishonesty or prevarication or incompetence. I think the committees and the council has done a heroic job of putting a plan together that isn't perfect. And it's obviously got some flaws. And it's obviously also incumbent on the council and the committee to listen to what the citizens are saying. And it sounds to me like the parking lot issues alone, Vista Lobos as well as those 2 parking lots, if there's a way, if Professor Beach is right, if there's a way to hit these numbers without that kind of major upset, which is a bone in the throat to a lot of people in town, including me, do it. Because I think, first of all, you have protected our autonomy. And I do believe that if we don't deliver to the state a document that can be certified, we will lose our autonomy. That's unacceptable. I don't want, the only thing worse than the housing mandate telling us what we're going to build is letting the what and where and who's going to build it be written by somebody in Sacramento instead of somebody in Carmel. So you've protected that and bought us time on that, but don't stop yet. It's not done. I encourage you, take the input that you're hearing, make the changes to the plan. And thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Anybody else wishing to speak tonight? All right, I'll close the public comment period, bring it back to council.
Brandon, do you want to put your question? Maybe put your questions back up on the screen?
While he's doing that, I would just remind the council that the answers to these questions will be need to be deferred until Monday. Okay.
So if the questions are going to be deferred till Monday, what do we do tonight? Just receive this report?
If you have questions about that what was presented, you can certainly ask your questions, or if there was something from public comment that stimulated a question that you have. But what I'm counseling you all to do is not say that you are going to vote on Monday to either include the city-owned sites or not include them, that you keep an open mind between now and Monday, because you may hear public comment from these folks or others on Monday.
Brandon, can you address a couple of questions that I heard tonight? I can try. I think, I'm sorry, I don't know your, Mr. Booter. He had a couple slides that discussed that we only had, or all of the lower income units were kind of focused in the public lands. Can you maybe explain a little bit how the ADUs work and also the hotel motel scenario that we have put forward?
Sure. Yeah, I can try. So one thing that's important, high level to remember, is that for a site to be considered one of those affordable units, and remember we've got a pie that's 349 units, and that pie is broken into 5 different slices of affordability. One slice is market rate. That's about, I think it's 118 units of market rate. And the rest of that 349 has to fall into one of 4 affordability categories. In order for it to fall in one of those 4 affordability categories, that unit has to be deed restricted, income deed restricted. So for example, Chef Pepe, I'm excited to hear that he's got some properties that he wants to put housing on top of. In order for those to count for affordable, in other words, to take units away from those city-owned sites, he'll need to put a deed restriction on those sites saying that they'll be limited to certain incomes. So that's the first thing to consider. It is true, Mr. Booter, and I want to exchange phone numbers because I am excited to have him on board with implementation. I think it's great to have people that are interested in this. It is true that the majority, if not all, of our affordable units are concentrated in either the Sunset Center North, South lot, or Vista Lobos. And part of that, again, came from the fact that I said earlier, we were set off in the direction of no third stories in the downtown area and not to intensify the residential districts with multifamily housing. Third stories going up is going to allow the development to be able to handle, to make it pencil, to have more affordable units. Same thing with having multifamily units in the residential district. Your question about the ADUs is a good one, because as we've seen in other jurisdictions in previous RENA cycles, ADUs have been able to be counted, and we have it written this way in our housing element. ADUs are be able to counted, some of them, as affordable units on a, basically 90% can be affordable, 10% are market rate. And that the breakdown is of that 90 is spread across the different affordability categories. So for example, if we get a year down the road and we have more ADUs that have been developed than we anticipated in our plan, and they count towards those affordable, those 4 slices of pie that are affordable, that changes the calculation. And I keep saying living document, and that's not to say we have plans right now to know what we're going to do with the document in the year or 2 years or 3 years or 4 years, but I think it's unreasonable for any state agency to expect that an 8-year plan is exactly what's going to happen in 8 years. And that's the way we've approached this exercise. So that answers the question about the ADUs. We talked a little bit about the affordability mix. Yes, it is at our city-owned sites, but that was because those were what we at the time saw as the most viable sites, because we didn't know, and we can't confirm that every private property owner is going to be willing to deed restrict their property to meet those affordability categories. I think we're pretty confident in the 118 market rate units because people can make money off of those developments, but to deed restrict income affordability for private property is difficult.
Mm-hmm. And then,
and I would follow up by saying, because you control the land, you can naturally put you can restrict the units the way you see fit. So you could use the 4 affordable categories that Brandon's talking about, Mr. Richards, and break down the number of units on those properties we've identified as opportunity sites any way you want.
And I also would like to make it clear that we very much appreciate what you said, and also what you said about the sprinkling throughout the town. I think that it was always our intent to do that, and we never did want to come out and concentrate on, say, just south of the Mission. Like that's an area that could be developed, but we didn't want to concentrate anywhere at all. That was never an intention. I think the North Lot came out of necessity. Like, we had to come up with other ideas and areas because we felt so strongly about not changing our zoning. That was one of the benchmarks for us, was to not change the zoning and intensify the density of our residential district. That was really, really important to us. And that's why this document is we're not saying that everything has to be in the North Lot. It is unfortunate, as Brandon mentioned, that was the #1 spot, because it could have easily been the number 15th slot or something like that. Is there anything else, Karen, that maybe you'd like to address that we heard tonight?
Well, the necessity to use those city-owned sites are exactly that. They are the most viable. We have no way of forcing any private property owners downtown or anywhere else to build anything. And once they find out they have to be deed restricted, that will be even fewer people that want to do that, because deed restricted passes when you sell property, correct? Mm. These sites are something we came to because the state wants to see viability. They don't want to see what some cities have tried to sneak in, like a boat slip or a mansion that will never be developed or whatever. They want viability. The greatest viability that we have is the sites that we actually own, and those are the ones we can control what gets built on through an RFP process in a much better way. We can't guarantee what would happen at Mr. Pepe's site or anywhere else downtown. Those are still, we have identified some of those downtown, I believe, haven't we? Yes, we have identified those in the commercial district. And we were told pretty clearly, no third stories, even though we have third stories downtown. And we were told, don't spread it out in the R1 district. Mm-hmm. We would have to rezone the R1 district to be R4, it's my understanding, in order to have them in the residential district. And there are very few lots available in the residential district. If you want your neighbor to do an SB 9 or 10, I'm not sure which one is which, and put a duplex or a quad next to you, that's something that might occur if we have to shift away from the viable sites that we own. And then I can only imagine what that would result in.
Can I also, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but just to keep this going, the parking's been mentioned a lot. And everybody, I think the common misconception is that if we were to build anything in a parking lot, we would lose the parking. And can you clear that up maybe?
Yeah, so for example, we can talk about the Sunset Center, because that has a very specific thing related to parking. When the environmental document was adopted for that project, the remodel, it included an analysis of the parking that was available on the site and basically said, you cannot have less than this amount of parking. So that number is hard coded into that site. So that's a baseline. But any of these city-owned sites, the process would be an RFP that would go out. And if the city, over and above that, we require a developer who would bid on a project to keep the baseline of parking, cover the amount of parking that would be required for any residential units, and if there was commercial or parks or anything that was developed, include those in the total calculation of parking that would be built as part of the project. And the thing about an RFP, because it is city-owned property and it's developed through a broad public process, the Sunset Center working with the board, with the public, with the council, we can put whatever sort of limitations or shape on that project we would want, which could include things like, if you propose for a project, it has to have free parking. It has to include an open space. It has to include, I don't know, but this would be the process that would happen.
I think this was interesting. I think I can share this because we have met with the Sunset Board. Both Karen had met with the Sunset Center Board of Directors, and the other day I met with the Sunset Board of Directors. And what we came away with, or at least what I came away with, is they were actually understanding what was happening there, and they were quite receptive, actually, and I think that's what prompted Beth Bowman, the director, to call tonight, because one of the directors actually said, hey, if you were to build housing on this part, if you were to build an underground parking lot and put some sort of housing and some sort of museum and some sort of open space on top of that parking lot, could we require that some of those units are made for employees of the Sunset Center? And that would be in the request for proposal. Mm-hmm. So they kind of took a different look at it and said, this could be a positive thing for the Sunset Center. So that kind of goes to what Mr. McWalters asked or said earlier about that letter that was written. I think that once people start to understand more of what's happening, and they start to let the creative juices come in, much to what like Victoria Beach is saying, then things can happen, positive things can happen. And that's why this has been such a process. It's not new, Chef. This is not new that we've asked the citizens and the business owners and the real estate owners to come up with ideas. I've talked so often to so many different hotels about this, and to other people that do own buildings downtown that could create office space. I talked to Furman the other day at Bruno's, and I said, hey, Furman, it's not like we're going to take your parking lot, but if you want, he has an office above the deli, and I said, if you wanted to turn those into 2 apartments, you could. If you want to lose your office space, so there is some creative stuff out there that we could come up with, and that is to get us away from trying to intensify an area, much to like what you're saying, is because I don't want to see that in Carmel. I've never wanted to see an intensification of just one area that houses all this. That's what I love about the hotel program. Build a new hotel room and rent a long-term rental to one of your older hotel rooms. And this is a win-win for everybody wins on that one. We get higher TOTs, the owner of the hotel gets another room, an employee gets a place to stay here in town. So there's some creative stuff going on out there, but at this point, my charge is to protect the city of Carmel, safety and the atmosphere and the ambiance and all of these other things, and I am really, really scared to fall under builder's remedy and to not get this document certified. That scares me, and that's what I don't want to see happen, because it's just too risky. And if it was my money that I was risking, maybe I would take that risk, but it's not my money. It's taxpayers' money. I got to look out for the all and not just the few. So,
Brandon, could I ask you a question? You've called it a living document, so can you explain us more of the process? Like, let's say we go through the certification, but let's say, because I've heard some great creative ideas here, and I'd actually like us to pursue them, whether it's the church parking lots or having some business owners downtown find ways that they can do housing for their employees. Let's say we get together a group of citizens and they come up with an idea and they can find another 100 units or so. I'm just throwing out a number. Do they approach you and say, can we take something off of the plan we've submitted and then get those numbers substituted? Tell us what that process is and how we do it.
It's a great question. Thank you. So I'll start with the annual report. So every year we have to come back to the city council, and we also send a report to the state. It's a progress report. Here's what we've accomplished in the last 12 months with creating housing. And our dream situation would be that there's more housing that comes out of the woodwork that we didn't even plan for in our plan. So, Victoria is pointing to something. There are religious institutes in town. We've named a few in our housing element, but we didn't go through all of them. So if more of them produce housing, then that would be in the report. And so then when we get to that annual report, you as a city council and a community can look at how we're doing with producing, and you can provide policy direction to say, hey, have a conversation with the partners at HCD, because what we want to try to do is to make sure we maintain a certified housing element for the 8-year period, because anytime you're out of certification is when you're exposed to the risk of that builder's remedy. So once we get our housing element certified by the state, we want to try to keep it certified for the 8 years. And so we would never just do something, at our level. We would come up with a plan and run it by our partners at the state to see if it still tracks. So I think it's realistic to assume that if we showed homework and said, look, we've overproduced here, we've got more affordable units coming out of this type of project than we thought, so we want to change this over here, we would just have to show how we still have that 349 number and that it makes sense.
And then, but the actual nuts and bolts of it, of business owners, would they just come to you? And
they certainly could. Sorry, that was the other part of your question. They could, they could come to staff directly. I think if the city council decided to, there's a lot of ways to do this. I guess I'm thinking it through. If the city council decided to keep your ad hoc committee going for the 8 years, they could reach out to the electeds and start there. They could reach out to staff. We could, have every 6 months an internal report to city council. There's a lot of ways to slice it. But like with anything, if someone reaches out to us with a question, we do get back to them and we try to point them in the right direction. So we would be a first place for people to start, for sure. Because
I feel now the community is getting more engaged, and they're speaking out, and there's things they obviously are not liking, and there's things now that people are getting the idea over their head, the little light bulb. So I want to encourage that, and I want people to know that they can reach out to you and that we can do some alternatives and perhaps make some of the changes that are controversial and are causing friction in our community, because I don't like seeing that, and I'd like to find a way that we can integrate this and not make it a contentious thing.
Yeah, and I just have to say it again, my only recommendation if we do something like that is to make sure that we involve the state, when and if we get a certified housing element, that we then don't change it without sort of getting that early green light from the state saying, okay, we're doing what you've asked us, and here's why we want to make a change. That would be my only caveat to that.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I'd like to clear up a couple things. We have been accused of spending an enormous amount of money with EMC to do this plan. The money for that came from a grant from the state. It's called a LEAP grant. And now we have another grant from the state called a REAP grant that will help us create objective design guidelines. This is something that the state actually did to help cities. They gave these grants, and they were divided up among all the jurisdictions in your local unit. Ours happens to be the AMBAG unit. So we did not spend city money particularly, other than our staff time, as far as I understand. We also, at the beginning of this process, after the Econ Northwest study, came up with a potential amount of sites, I believe we sent letters to the majority of the people who were on those site lists. Is that correct, Marnie? So people were approached, and we didn't get much response back at all. So this isn't like we didn't send out a letter to those folks saying, hey, look, you have an opportunity here. We haven't even started the implementation or the incentivizing stage at all. We just need to get our housing certified, because the city of Beverly Hills just lost its ability to give out permits. Huntington Beach was mentioned. They've lost 8 of their 9 last lawsuits that they filed. I don't know whether all of them were housing. The other day, a court of law just okayed the builder's remedy. We have some really tough issues facing us, and we need to have as many viable sites as we can, because we may have to substitute things in here in a year or 2 or 3 as we see how we're going. If we're not getting anywhere, those city sites might be the only viable place. And I think people are imagining them as something terrible. At one time, there was supposed to be some sort of plaza at Sunset Center, and they didn't have enough parking, so they had to put the parking in front of Sunset Center. And those parking places are protected. It's just very, very frustrating, since we did start this process quite a long time ago, to at the 11th hour be asked to totally revise it. And if that is what happens, we will not meet our certification, I don't believe, at all. And we will be back at the drawing board and perhaps lose grants and lose our ability to continue to have issue building permits and other things.
We'll lose local
I do want to also use the term underutilized. Underutilized. Yes, they're parking lots today. When did everybody fall in love with parking lots so much? I don't quite understand. But they're underutilized. They could be both housing and parking. You know, there's no reason they can't be in combination. And that the housing, of course, I would prefer it to be multifamily housing. Absolutely. That would be the ideal. However, I am very doubtful about how many of the very low and low we could get out into our neighborhoods and on any other sites. So I have some really big concerns, and I have to tell you, I'm a little disappointed at the vitriol that some people have come forward with, the nastiness, the accusations that we did something underhanded. I never would have agreed at the last meeting to remove those sites, knowing how important they are, without a fight. And there was no argument about those sites at the last time, because it was a softening of the language of the timing that I remember. So I think we, have some work to do here, and I'm very concerned.
Jeff, do you have any desire to belabor the meeting?
Thank you, everybody, for your comments, and Karen and Bobby for your work. The one thing I would really say is, I agree with the comments that sort of Vince and Victoria made at the last meeting, and that Hans made at this meeting about sort of the, intensifying the affordable housing component through town. But I don't see how, how to get that housing into any of the other neighborhoods. Like I'm not in the position where that path has really appeared in my sites yet. What I think is a tear down house is appeared on the market next door to me, 2 doors down from me, and it's $2.8 million. And one of the constraints, we've talked a lot about constraints, and I talked about this last time, Hans, you'll remember. One of the constraints was that, the city doesn't really want to spend money. So how are we going to get 1 or 2 affordable units, or even 3 affordable units, which we could get under the ADU laws on this house, on this lot, without someone ponying up $2.8 million? Where's that money going to come from? So I'm struggling to, and if in a different section of town it's $1.8 million rather than $2.8 million, where's that going to come from? One possibility, of course, would be to sell the north lot and then use that money that we got from the north lot to buy residential properties in town, but that would destroy 2 things. First, it would again destroy the integrity of the north lot, which we've spoken of, and I'm using north lot just as an example. It would destroy the integrity of the north lot that we've talked about, and then we're back with the single family zoning district, the sort of sanctity of the single family zoning district, and how all these things sort of work together. So this is a big puzzle. Victoria, I think Ms. Beach at the last meeting talked about the second floors downtown, and I'm sorry if it was someone else, or I mischaracterized your statements. We've had this, we've emphasized single family, we've emphasized rental units downtown forever. And I don't know that we've built any, like over the course of the past 5 years. So without, we have a couple, not 12. So maybe Rich can provide the next 12 over his 3 properties. I'm thinking about the ones on the Dolores that have yet to be started. And so I'm struggling with how not just the units are going to get there, but how we're going to get the affordable units downtown. Again, without the deed restriction and therefore the influx of cash that's going to come from somewhere. Like, where's this money going to come from? And the city is blessed, through the foresight of previous people that sat in our position to sort of have this property. And here we are, we're trying to make the best, out of the situation, given the various constraints that I've talked about and Bobby and Karen have, dealt with over the course of the past year. And yeah, it's not perfect. But, I think that the church idea that, the church idea that Victoria spoke about, yeah, I think that's a real thing. And I think if there's enough interest in that, what I would hope is that we can get this element certified, and that there's enough interest in that and substituting in some of those properties for these other ones, or better yet, having the development happen and then substituting in those properties, taking some of these properties off the list as that development and the affordable units that belong on that development happen. Maybe a future council, maybe us if it happens next year, or a future council can take these city-owned properties off the list. Brandon talks about it being a living document, and I think that there's lots of room. I think that there's lots of room for those things to happen as the situation on the ground, changes. The things that I think Victoria was alluding to, those are state law changes. Those are state laws that give churches the right to do things on their property that other owners might not have. So the owner of 7th and Dolores, for example, can't do anything with their parking lot, but one of the various churches downtown could do something with their parking lot. So those rights already exist, and if we can get some of those churches to if we can figure out as a council or a community how to get those churches, how to incentivize those churches to do that. And again, there's this question of money, like how are we going to incentivize these churches to do that without just paying them money, especially with the low income units. Like, how is a church going to afford to, make 3 of their units very low income? Like, I don't have these answers, but, with a community, and Alessandra spoke about, people and the community coming together. Maybe there's a will with this council, with a future council, to figure out how to get some of those church projects to pencil out, and understanding that a change over here, with the church may result in our ability to have a little more control, or it's a little less warehousing, you know, as Hans points out, over here on the north lot or one of the other city-owned properties. So I look forward to those discussions, but I'm also, you know, pretty ready to certify the housing element. Thank you.
I would like to, there's one thing that does bother me, this term warehousing. I don't consider our Carmel Foundation housing warehousing older, less economically viable people. I don't consider that warehousing at all. And I think just giving people the ability to live in a community like ours is helping people not be concentrated all at Fort Ord in a great big giant housing element that is all affordable units. We don't own any property outside of the at Fort Ord, and even cities that do are having trouble utilizing those sites for environmental reasons. But you know, the last housing unit, the fifth cycle, we were assigned 31 units. We built 18, and they were all market rate, and those people purchased the water. The same sites downtown above stores were on the fifth cycle, if I remember. So no one took advantage of that. No one came to us and said, I'll build one. So, you know, this is sort of like what we have is what we have.
Well, in the spirit of not interrupting and not continuing any governmental redundancy, I'm going to say I agree with what Jeff said about the church sites. That was my concern right now. I think if you look at what's allowed in church sites, it's amazing what they can do. They actually go up to 3 stories. They can actually waive all parking. Imagine when they try to put that into somebody's neighborhood, how they're going to react. But I think it's a viable opportunity. We just got to go ahead and explore these things. So that noted, we stand adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Why weren't we allowed to do what we thought we were going to do?
Oh, I asked my question.